Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the conference. And I will say we saved one of the best presenters for last, Mr. Stephane Bancel, CEO of Moderna. And I'm joined here by Dan, who's the chief of infectious diseases, right? So
that's right.
Should add a nice overlay on a lot of Moderna's pipeline. My name is Alec Stranahan. I'm a senior biotech analyst covering SMID at Bank of America. So with that, Dan, you want to kick off?
Sure. Stephane, the last 2 months have been just extraordinary in terms of infectious diseases. We've seen the reemergence of Mpox. We've seen EEE and West Nile virus here in New England. We're about to enter the fall respiratory virus season. Which viruses are you at Moderna most concerned about? And can you tell us a bit about the efforts that you have, especially around latent and reemerging viruses?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. So the way we look at the portfolio, we really think there's still a lot of work to be done in respiratory disease, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. And so our goal there is to combine different vaccine components to make it easier for consumer. Because as you were joking before we walked on stage, you're getting your vaccine, I think, next week.
Right.
And there's so many vaccines and so many shots to get to be protected. So we think that the consumer and the doctors and the payers want combination vaccines to have broader protection. On the latent side of the house, as you know, latent virus, some of them cause disease when we get infected, some are asymptomatic. But in the long term, because once in our body are in our body forever, in the long term, as we age and our immune system weakens, as we have more and more of those viruses in the body, they create a lot of damage. And so we are very committed to working really hard to bring as many vaccines as we can against latent viruses. We have a CMV vaccine in phase 3. As you know, never been a CMV vaccine approved. It's a 6 mRNA product, 5 of those making like a pentamer structure inside your body. So we are looking forward to getting the data before the end of the year for phase 3 based on the case we are accruing. We have an EBV vaccine that's very exciting to us because not only it could help teenagers prevent mononucleosis, but our team is very excited about the role of EBV in multiple sclerosis. And so that could be a very interesting one. And we have also HSV vaccine and a couple more. So that's a strategy that we think is really important from a public health standpoint because there's great vaccine against HPV, of course, and we've seen the benefit of that vaccine, great vaccine against shingles. But there's still a lot of big holes in healthcare that we are in 2024, and I think the patients and the world deserves vaccine against those viruses. And then the other one that we are working on, because of course the pandemic was awful for all of us, and as you say, there's always emergence and re-emergence of tropical viruses. If you look at what happened in the US, as you described, in Europe, if you look at it between Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, every year you have people reporting cases of Zika or chikungunya or dengue that have never left Europe. So it's clearly in mosquitoes locally. And I think the climate change is only going to make matter worse across all the regions in Americas, Europe, and Asia. And so we're working, we have a Zika vaccine in phase 2. The team is working in the lab on the dengue vaccine to make sure there's no interference. We're working on a chikungunya vaccine. So those are things we're trying to set up public-private partnership, mostly with academic groups, because you have scientists that have spent a lifetime working on the virus. They know the biology of the virus inside out. And so we just want to join forces to bring as many as we can to market, sometimes through partnership. We have an HIV vaccine with the Gates Foundation because we're still 40, 50 years after HIV and still no vaccine to prevent it. We believe it's a solvable problem. It might be taking quite a number of iterations of a vaccine, but because we can iterate the technology so quickly, we can go back in the clinic in like 60 days from a new hypothesis that we think learning in human is the best way to learn quickly.
That's quite a portfolio.
Yes.
Definitely keeping busy on top of the pandemic. Maybe we can talk about your latest COVID vaccine that's been approved and is available broadly. How's that rollout gone so far this year? How has receptivity been? maybe comparing to last year as we're coming out?
Sure. So the vaccine was approved mid-August by the FDA, which is around 3 weeks earlier than last year, which we are very pleased about. The CDC has been reporting that most probably 2 to 3 million people got a flu shot last year, very early in season, before the COVID shot was approved, and never went back for COVID. If you look at the pharmacies, the early data, because it's very early in season, shows that there's a much higher COVID to flu vaccination ratio, meaning more and more people wanting a flu shot, getting also a COVID shot. And what I'm really pleased about is the elderly class is getting very high vaccination rate. If you look at the season that just finished, so October or September 2023 to spring 24, the CDC numbers that around 700,000 Americans got hospitalized because of COVID, hospitalized this season. It's like around 3 times flu. So I think as you get more and more people understanding those facts, that well, of course, we're not in a pandemic anymore, thank the Lord. COVID is still a virus that's going around. It's getting people sick. But people that are older, of course, are more vulnerable, like they are for any other viruses. It's not different. And the other piece also that I'm starting to be very pleased about how some large companies are engaging is on long COVID. Because I think we still don't talk enough about long COVID. Long COVID is a reality. I know people that have long COVID, and it's just terrible. And sometimes there's somebody 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, otherwise very healthy, that has a drastic impact on the quality of their life. And so I see a lot of large employers reopening vaccine clinic because they sometimes closed them during the pandemic because people were at home and will go to CVS to get a flu shot. So reopening vaccine clinic on site and making them flu clinic and COVID clinics.
You mentioned the continued hospitalizations from COVID, and of course, preventing hospitalization and death is an incredibly important goal for vaccination. But there are other potential benefits from vaccines, especially economic benefits for individuals, and time off from work, time home from school. Can you talk about that and what the implications might be for pathways to vaccine approval?
Sure. So indeed, I mean, we talk a lot about death and hospitalization, and I think also hospitalization. I think a lot of people, especially younger people, are looking at Alec.
Thank you.
You're clearly much younger than at least myself. I think younger people tend to not fully appreciate, I mean, you're a doctor, Dan, so you think about it at a very different level, that an hospitalization of an older person is a big deal. If you look at the numbers, around 10% loss of muscles in a week, which has a drastic impact on quality of life when people leave the hospital. The number of people who go back to the hospital is around 30%. Within 6 months are back to the hospital. I mean, being hospitalized when you are an older person is a big, big deal. And sometimes I think we as a society just tend to sometimes not really appreciate what it means. It's like, oh, they're hospitalized, they're okay. They might not be dead, but they might be in a much worse medical state. And as you say, of course, the economic impact, we talked about long COVID, but just the economic impact, the impact on people. Look, I've gotten my flu shot all my adult life. I have no non-comorbidity factor, so I was not worried to be hospitalized, but I didn't want to be sick. I didn't want to miss a vacation. I didn't want to get my parents sick. And so, I mean, if you think about it, there's this whole movement about longevity and aging well and so on. As we all know, the best thing in sick care, which we call healthcare, is not being sick.
Right.
And when you think about it, there are so many diseases for which people will be walking on their knees to get a prevention so that they don't get the disease they have. And so we have beautiful vaccines available from a large set of viruses, large set of companies. And I think that it's one of the best return on investment that has ever happened in healthcare if you look at the numbers. Yeah, and so I think I'm hopeful that as we educate people, because there's been so much misinformation during COVID, that people realize that it's just the right thing to do for them and for their loved one to be protected.
Great. And Moderna's not stopping, you've got a very effective COVID vaccine that you continue to improve for each season, but you're not stopping there in terms of the development. You've got your efficacy enhanced next generation option and also your combo. Maybe you could talk a bit more about that.
Sure. While 95% of people were hospitalized last year, the 700,000 I'm talking about, were not up to date with the annual booster, we still got 5% of people who are hospitalized and up to date with their annual booster. And so in the mindset that we have to protect every life and keep pushing the science, we communicated in the spring new head-to-head efficacy data on the next-gen COVID vaccine that we intend to file to the FDA before the end of this year, hoping to have it potentially on the market next season. The efficacy is much stronger than the current Moderna vaccine, which has shown stronger efficacy than the other mRNA vaccine, just because the dose is higher. And so you make more antibodies, so they last longer. I think it's that simple scientifically. So that's one innovation that we're very excited about because it should help more people again in that high-risk category. And the other one is the combination. So again, the next gen for us is combining Fluzone HD equivalent, so a very high Fluzone or flu efficacy vaccine with this higher efficacy COVID vaccine into a single shot. So you can get one shot in the winter, especially for the elderly or people at high risk, and not be sick that winter. So we want to keep innovating. There's still a lot of people being hospitalized by COVID, and those people should not be hospitalized. There's still people dying. There's people getting long COVID. We're going to keep fighting COVID because this virus, we believe, is going to stay with us forever as humans. And we just need to get better tools out there, more education, so that more people get protected.
Picking up on that last point about education, we here are all incredibly excited about these vaccines and the enormous public health benefit of vaccines and vaccines to come. But we've seen, in part through the COVID pandemic, the rise of, whether you want to call it vaccine skepticism or hesitancy. How do we educate and excite the general public about the incredible health benefits of vaccines and the importance of being vaccinated, not just for your individual health, but as you said earlier, to protect those around you and for the health of the community as a whole?
Yeah, so I don't think there's a silver bullet, unfortunately. I think it's a lot of different tactics. One is we're trying to really get healthcare professionals to have those discussions with consumers, because our experience and our market research shows that in the last season, some doctors did not want to engage in COVID discussion because it has been so politicized in this country over the last few years that some doctors just don't want to go through yet another problem or another heated discussion with, because they don't know a priori if a person is going to be pro-vaccine, against vaccine. And so we heard a lot of that for market research last year. So we're trying to really educate the doctors with local data, because sometimes doctors who are very busy trying to do their best, so maybe are not as aware about what's happening in their local community. So we've used kind of literally zip code by zip code data on hospitalization rate, death rates of COVID, flu, to make people realize just the fact, which is, and doctors realize that it's 3 times higher risk of hospitalization than flu. So it kind of makes no sense from a public health standpoint to give somebody a flu shot and not have that discussion about COVID. And then there's the education, of course, of consumer, because there's been, again, a lot of misinformation. So we're trying to use actually social media where it could be used in a good way, in the sense of really targeting people based on their age group, their demographics. For example, on long COVID, we've been running a campaign where we've actually interviewed a lot of people who had long COVID and used those little videos, like kind of TikTok quick videos, but only in those local community. Because if you are a 24-year-old in Alabama, whatever happens, and you're male, whatever happens to an older female in Massachusetts, you don't really care, it's not me.
Right.
And vice versa, obviously. And so we're trying to just have those local stories that are very customized literally by your zip code and where you're using your phone and your profile that social media owns for you to try to really customize something that you might resonate with. So we're making progress. There's still a lot of work to do. And we keep fine-tuning on what's working, and we're doing more of it. And what's not working, we're kind of stopping it or trying to fix it and then stopping it. So we're just still learning a lot, and a lot of partnership with the CDC and, of course, hospitals and large retail pharmacy.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the efforts you're making in oncology. And I think this is a great example of really the opportunity that you have in front of you with mRNA as the backbone technology and the flexibility of where it could go even outside of infectious disease, which was the first proof point, accelerated a little bit because of the pandemic. So we know that it works.
Yeah.
What's the upside potential, you think, from the platform? And maybe talk about the INT program.
Sure. So the team is developing quite a large number of oncology programs, trying to use some of the unique features of mRNA to go after mechanism of actions that have been either understood in the academic world or demonstrated through other means to say, okay, can we do something unique with mRNA? So one of the problems we're working on is, can you do kind of T-cell, but for solid tumors, where everybody gets the same product. And so we partnered with a company to get their technology and code it in the mRNA cassette. And that could be, of course, tremendous because CAR-T are wonderful for liquid tumor, but it's only 10% of the cancer. And they are very expensive. And we have a healthcare massive budget issue across the world in any country. And so think about a world where you could have the CAR-T-like technology for solid tumor, where you and I get exactly the same product that is at the Brigham in a fridge somewhere. That would be a very different price point, obviously, and that's something we're excited about. But we're going to have to wait a bit more to get more data on this. The one that we are the most excited about now is the individualized neoantigen therapy, where basically we make an individualized product for every patient. It's basically based on comparing the healthy DNA from a healthy cell of our body to the DNA of a cancer cell, and try to basically, to simplify, to teach the immune system what have you been missing about the signature of that cancer. I think when we shared the 2-year survival data compared to Keytruda 18 months ago at ASCO, people were like, that's interesting. But this year when I went to ASCO, I was really excited to see how with 1 more year of data, and now such a big divergence, as you see the 2 survival curves diverging over time, a lot of clinicians, especially people that were in the clinical studies that have seen those patients and have seen what it is to have a Keytruda only or Keytruda plus combined with Moderna's INT product, what an impact it has. It is in melanoma. We have already set up many more studies in different tumor types. We also want to try this in monotherapy. Way back pre-COVID, when very few people know even what Moderna was or what we are doing, we shared early clinical data in oncology. Some people in lung, head and neck, melanoma were responding with INT only that we tested before we started combining with Keytruda for safety reasons and to find the dose. As we have the ability to go earlier and earlier in disease. As you know, checkpoints are wonderful when they work, but they usually come with pretty serious side effects. And again, it's better to have side effects than being dead, obviously. But as you know, they're not used as standard of care early in disease. And the other big trend that I'm really excited about is liquid biopsy. I used to run a diagnostic company before Moderna, and if 15 years ago you'd have told me, Stephane, one day liquid biopsy are going to be a thing, I would have most probably been laughing, saying, no, they're never going to be a thing. The rate of false positive and false negative are going to be way too high. And of course, I would have been wrong. And it just shows you that the power of compounding and all the scientists working on those things and all the engineers and technicians and the computing data and cost. Is it perfect yet? No. Is it getting better and better with time? Yes. And so I could see a world in a few years where the advance of liquid biopsy really help us as a community to be able to see cancer much earlier. And I think that will open a huge opportunity for patients through the INT product, which is, because it's the same technology as a COVID vaccine or a flu vaccine, would you take the type of side effect if you had a stage 1 or stage 2 cancer to be able, through just a few shots that you could get at your local pharmacy, by the way, you might not even have to go to your hospital, because if it's made for you and I know the pharmacy you prefer, with a QR code, we can ship it to your local CVS or Walgreens. And it's an intramuscular, meaning any pharmacist can deliver the product. As a monotherapy, it could be just totally different cost structure, impact on patient. You could literally be told on a liquid biopsy you have a stage 1, cancer. Go get your shot starting 30 days after you're told, and basically get a shot in the morning on your way to work and go to work and have a normal life. So I'm really excited. Again, it's not going to come the next few weeks. But if you take a 3, 5, 10-year view on where we are going in oncology as a, again, medical community, I'm really excited about those fundamental learnings we have in the labs, in the clinical practice, and then into industry that are helping bring product back to patients in hospital. It's really exciting.
You know, RNA vaccines exploded on the scene with COVID, and we've heard about all the other vaccines, both for infectious diseases and for oncology. But it seems that we're just at the beginning of what the technology of RNA can do therapeutically. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about other approaches with RNAs, especially for rare diseases, for example, the glycogen storage diseases and other examples.
Sure. I mean, if you go back to the basic of the science of mRNA, it's like you code for an mRNA, you inject it into the body, and it uses our own machinery in our cells to make the protein that was coded. I think the best example for all the skeptics is, of course, the COVID vaccine, which is we coded for a protein of a virus, the spike protein, not for a human protein. And the first time for all of us that were not infected by the virus before, were naive to the virus, first time we got a shot, our body didn't think about it, read the instruction of spike, make spike protein. Our immune system was like, what is this thing? Make antibody against it, and voila. And so actually the company was started, which not a lot of people might remember, on rare genetic disease. Because with what had happened in RNAi, the notion to get a nucleic acid into the liver, whereas you know the liver, because it's a protein factory, there's so many rare diseases because of protein deficiency in the liver. It was kind of an obvious one for all of us at the early days of thinking about building a company around mRNA to go after. We're very happy, and we just announced that our 2 first programs for PA propionic acidemia and MMA methylmalonic acidemia, 2 disease originating from the liver, that we should be in pivotal study by the end of the year. Wow. We think we'll find the dose, and we are able to repeat those. Some kids have been on drugs for 2 to 3 years, getting an infusion every 2 weeks. And so that's, I think, the most obvious example of how you use technology. Kids have a wrong DNA from mom and dad. They cannot make the right protein. Well, just give them a little bit of help by giving them in the right cell the instruction for the protein they're lacking or they cannot make themselves. And you should be there. So very excited about that application. And you can think about, I mean, there's so many, I mean, literally hundreds of rare diseases in the liver. And again, because of a cassette nature of mRNA, where you always use the same 4 chemical bricks, you just change the order and you have a new product, that we might not need to do 100 clinical trials, because some of them, because it's ultra rare disease, would be almost impossible to just run. But is there a world at which you go to the FDA at some stage with 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 rare genetic disease, where you basically, a bit like in cancer, where you have a discussion, say, look, if we always use the same chemistry, always use the same process, is there a way to do even an open basket study or something like this clinically, and then have an approval for the process like we're doing for cancer? Because if you think about it in cancer, we're not, I mean, every product is different. Yeah. Your product will be different from my product. And so there's already a regulatory pathway, like with CAR-Ts, to approve product based on their manufacturing processes and all the scientific technical features you define as a product, because every product is different. So I'm quite excited about where this is going. We're also working on autoimmune disease, because we're kind of working on ways to get mRNA inside your immune cells. And so then you can play with little things to even titrate it. So there's a lot of things. And maybe to close, I mean, on that topic, the way I always thought about it since we started the company is just using recombinant as a mental model. And what I used to tell our team in the early days, because everybody thought we were, of course, crazy to work on mRNA as a drug, is think about the Amgen and Genentech team in the 70s. This is 50 years ago. Do you think the first 10 or 20 people, they will have envisioned a Keytruda product? I have no way to prove it, but I'm almost sure if we go in a time machine and meet the early team of Genentech, you know, the few people on the front row here, and we say, guys, keep working hard because one day there's going to be a PD-1 antibody. I have no way to prove it, but I will bet with you that they will have said, are you crazy? We cannot even make an E. coli work to make a human protein. Because of course, at the beginning, nothing was working. Like us, at the beginning, nothing was working. That's what happens when you do cutting-edge science that nobody has done in the world before you. But keep working hard, because one day there will be an antibody, PD-1, and you will really do amazing things in cancer. they would have had this whole question about antibodies. How do you make antibodies, in E. coli, which you can't. You have to go into CHO cells, as we all know now, but they didn't know back in the 70s. And then I'm sure they would have said next, by the way, what is PD-1? Because 50 years ago, PD-1 was not a thing. It has not been discovered. So just use that to think about the next 20, 30 years of mRNA. And for me, the best second example is COVID. COVID happened. COVID was never in our 5-year plan. It was not even in our budget for 2020 when COVID happened, obviously. But think about it. We got the sequence put online by the Chinese, and literally within 48 hours, we had a vaccine going into production. That very same chemical structure that 11 months after was approved by the FDA to go and to be approved and released to help all of us get out of the pandemic. That's kind of remarkable. The team in silico, in computers, in 2 days, designed the entire product. We never changed one atom after that. That's, for me, where medicine is going, and patients are going to benefit, and that's exciting.
Wow. I think, yeah, that's a great point to end on, but I think we'll have to leave it there. So please join me in thanking Stephane for the great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Alec.
No, that was good.